Social media basically sorts everyone into a shapes now. You are this aesthetic, this niche, specific type of person. And if you can't be categorized, algorithm doesn't know what to do with you. So do you think we are building a world where wobbly shapes literally can't survive?
I think that's a hard question to answer. Social media kind of takes the humanity out of human connection. It is beholden to the whims of an algorithm, and you're only seeing what it wants you to see based upon little data points that it's gleaning from you to keep you scrolling and clicking. It's not like the level of connection you would get organically just engaging with the world around you. Overall, there's some good things about social media, but I do think that there's also negative things in the way that it impacts people's body image or their confidence, especially little kids.
I recently saw the pictures posted on Instagram. That seems very fun and cute.
Yeah, a lot of my kids are very photogenic. I'm still kind of trying to figure out my voice on there because I'm pretty new to this whole authorship and Instagram posting. So I just kind of try to post stuff that feels like the energy of the brand I'm trying to build. But yeah.
The kids must be loving you.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of depends on the situation. Like if I'm putting them to bed or, making them do something, like maybe they don't love me as much. But, when we get to sit down and make stuff together, they're pretty keen on that. They're both like really creative, so it's fun to draw with them and create with them. There's sometimes I just can't keep up with them. Their minds just go so quickly,
Wow, it's very creative. So
Yeah. I honestly think like being around kids is like being creative around a little kid is like running with somebody who's a little bit faster than you. You kind of got to like push yourself and you get a little winded to keep up with them. Like with a kid, they're so creative, so naturally that you really got to like push it to keep up with them because they just access and connect things so much more effectively than adults do because we've kind of constricted ourselves. It's pretty awesome.
Right. So, hello everyone, and welcome back to Pages of Pandora, the show where we talk about stories and the authors behind them. Today, I'm sitting down with Greg Bro, author, illustrator, animated filmmaker, and the creative mind behind Every Shape Has a Place, a children's book about belonging that honestly hit me harder than I expected. Greg runs a creative place called Brute Optimism, and his work leaves at this really interesting intersection of playful storytelling and genuinely deep emotional ideas. Greg, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk with you.
So I read your book cover to cover, and I have to be honest that the line, if my shape is different, does that mean it's wrong, kind of stopped me cold, and that's a very heavy question to put in kids' book. So I want to know your perspective on this. Is there a broader message to share with the audience?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. That is like a pretty heavy question to put in a children's book, but I think that it's probably a feeling that a kid might feel, even if they don't have the language to articulate it quite as specifically as the book does. And I think that it's important to, even though a kid might feel it on a more sensorial level, to give them, stories and abstract shapes and different things set the stage for them to talk about some of those bigger emotional ideas. And I think, even if that doesn't come through to them, I think it creates like a situation where a parent can have a conversation with them and like prompt with questions like, what do you think the shape is feeling right now? Or have you ever felt like that? Like you're this whole idea of the right piece trying to fit in the wrong puzzle. I think that's like a universal feeling that's probably span the whole spectrum of age groups. Like little kids feel it, teenagers definitely feel it. I think even as an adult, whether it's in the workplace or otherwise, there can be that feeling of out of placeness and the wanting of belonging. So yeah, it's been fun to try to weave that into stories for kids.
Right, that makes so much of sense. I want to go a little bit philosophical here. Do you think every human being is born knowing their shape and life slowly trains it out of them? Or do you think we are born shapeless and the whole point of being alive is figuring out what shape are we?
Yeah, I don't think that we're born knowing what shape we are. There's probably some alchemy in there that has done some determination, but that's out of our control. But I really feel like part of the human experience is discovering who we are, and you need to like know yourself. Like, what is your shape to help guide you to places that align to you and your value system and your interests. So, like once you know those things, you kind of have a better sense the gravitational pull of certain pieces or certain places and certain people that give you that sense of belonging. So yeah, I think that's like one of the fun things about life is that it helps you kind of figure out what shape you are or what are even the values or things that help you feel like you belong in a place.
Right, that's a whole different perspective to look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
So we are living in a social media place right now, right? Social media basically sorts everyone into a shapes now. You are this aesthetic, this niche, specific type of person, and if you can't be categorized, algorithm doesn't know what to do with you. So do you think we are building a world where wobbly shapes literally can't survive?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like I think that's like a hard question to answer because I do feel like social media kind of takes the humanity out of human connection. Like it is very just beholden to the whims of an algorithm, and you're only seeing what it wants you to see based upon little data points that it's gleaning from you to keep you scrolling and clicking. So it's not like the level of connection you would get organically just engaging with the world around you. I think overall, there's some good things about social media, but I do think that there's also negative things in the way that it impacts people's body image or their confidence, especially little kids. But I do think, like in a strange way, as everything kind of becomes very cookie cutter and templatized, that like it's a great opportunity for the wobbly shape, the unique voice, to stand out in that world where everything's just kind of cookie cutter and standard. It's like there's so much AI slop out there that when you see something that feels genuine and authentic and unique, you're drawn to it in a way that you kind of just glaze over when you see the 10th AI video of two superstars fighting each other in a gas station parking lot or something. I want to see people and all their flaws. Like, life's not perfect. And I find that I am drawn more to people figuring it out or who have a uniqueness to them rather than just the cookie cutter version.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary thought, isn't it? We are more than just a data point or a niche.
Yeah. You just kind of like, you can't help but question, the things that you're seeing. Like, why am I seeing that? Or man, that ad is so specific. Like, how did it, what combination of data points did it glean to present me that thing? And then I end up buying it. And, it probably knows things about me that I don't even know about myself, which is fascinating on one hand, but there's also kind of a dark part of that you can't help but be a little suspect or suspicious of.
Right. I was reading your book, and there is a moment in the middle of the book where the pages go completely dark, black background, just text. It
Yep.
feels like the emotional bottom. Was it a design choice or a storytelling choice?
Yeah, I don't want to like cop out of the picking one of those because I honestly think that it's both. I think this is my first children's book, so part of it is kind of figuring out how to use the medium to convey ideas. And before that, I made a lot of short animated films, and part of the way that you can control the story is the pacing. The story plays out over the spectrum of time, but when you're creating a book, the pace of it is controlled by the reader, and how quickly they read through it or like how they turn pages. So, you kind of got to use those things that you have control of, the words and the art, and how they harmonize with each other to at least attempt to create some sense of emotion when you can. This is definitely like a moment where I wanted the reader to have a moment of reflection and pause. And I found, in reading it to people beforehand, that was coming through. And it just felt like a great place to do something different visually than what was happening in the pages before it. And like have this moment where you really got to sit with that feeling and connect with that character, but also probably, kind of connect to moments in your life that have made you feel that way. Everybody's felt that way. I think that's been like a really interesting thing in making a story and sharing it with other people, but also having a little distance from writing it and connecting it to moments in my life, like whether it's from a kid or even at a job that you're working at. You are certainly going to have those moments where you feel like, man, something's just a little off here. I don't quite fit in. Like maybe you don't completely understand why, but your body is sending you those signals to, get that sense. But I think, just pulling back to the book itself, I also think having those moments of pause create like a really great opportunity for the parents or the teacher or whoever to engage the kid in a conversation. Like ask them, what do you think he's feeling? Have you ever felt this way? What might you do to help others feel like they're welcome or they belong? And again, I'm a new author, so some of this is just kind of testing out to see where it goes. But I just felt like with the rhythm of the story, that was a good moment to pause, do something different.
Right, I feel it because it really works, you know. You could literally feel the character with the change in the background. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you know, as I'm like learning to tell stories in this new medium, I think part of it is like recognizing the emotional arc that you're feeling writing it and what you want the reader to feel. So for me, it's like exploring ways to uh, reflect that in the visuals in the story. And, it's still like a learning process, but it's still the same. You like want them to feel something or take them on a bit of a journey. And how can you use the storytelling and the art to I don't know, like tug at their heartstrings when you want to, or make them laugh, or have like a page where they turn it and they're like, oh, cool, like that's interesting. I didn't expect that. You know?
yeah, exactly. You illustrated the entire book yourself. The art style is really specific. It's loose, texture, almost like a chalk and watercolor had a get together. How did you land on that?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I found that making the shape characters was pretty easy because a square is a square, a circle is a circle. You want to reflect some personality through the design, but I also wanted to have the characters look a way that little kids could draw them too. But the hardest thing to figure out was the main shape character. Like, I wanted him to look, a little amorphous and have a personality to him that I think I ended up really focusing on his eyes because that's just such a easy way to reflect what he's feeling, like what his eyes are doing, what he's looking at. Maybe there's like a subtle expression that he has on him. And then I think as far as aesthetically, I didn't do like an outline around him just to kind of soften him a little bit, where you'll notice that the shapes themselves have a more specific line or border around them. And then the backgrounds, it's interesting. Like when you first make a book, part of it is like learning the world as you're making the thing. So I'm like, as I'm making the thing and going through the process, you're kind of uncovering the world yourself. And like, okay, they exist in this space. And what biome do the triangles live in versus the squares? It's like a disco world, and all this kind of stuff that would feel right for that shape. And there's this fun like sense of discovery. And then the emotional parts where it's a little bit more abstract with like paper textures and chalk and stuff like that. I was trying to think of how to reflect the emotion of the moment because I felt like that was more important than where the characters are. So I kind of experimented a little bit with that, and I was worried that my newness to the craft would like come across as this is just too much and it's going to be a bit messy, and maybe it is in places, but I think it was a necessary process for me to like really get a sense of that world and the characters. And I'm working on the second book in the Every Shapes Emotional Literacy series now, and it just came so much easier because I like knew the characters, I knew the world, and it was just kind of like reconnecting with them to go on adventures, and I didn't have to like solve some of the same problems that I had to solve with the first book. It's just different, more elevated problems. How can I expand the world? Who else lives here? How can I tell other stories that are a little bit different and stay true to the energy of the first book, but from a different angle? Because I don't want to just like have the same book with like a slightly different tweak each time. I want to like think of a real specific theme to convey through stories and then try to make it interesting for 30 pages or whatever.
Right, because I have seen so many authors and writers are coming today and they are writing a book with the help of AI, even for the children book as well, right?
Yep.
They're using AI images and all. But when I read your book, it
Yeah.
felt very different. It felt like some human has written that with those textures and everything. It was
Yeah,
really
that's so
interesting.
true. And I notice that too, like when I'm, either on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I see, you just kind of can feel when it's an AI image, just it's so perfect that it's almost kind of off-putting. Like there's no soul to it. And I kind of like something that's a little bit messy, like a coffee stain on the piece of paper or a smudge mark or something like that.
Right.
And it would, for me, like I've been doodling my whole life. Like, I grew up with undiagnosed ADHD. I was super shy and introverted, but art was always this like skeleton key to unlock connection with other people. And I just had it be that my whole entire life, where when I was a kid, it was kind of this thing where I'd be doodling to kind of settle my brain and focus, but it also drew kids to me to talk to me. And over years, I just got more comfortable engaging with others. Now, I'm pretty comfortable, giving speeches and talking and being in gyms talking to like little kids and stuff like that. But when I was a little kid, it was like not like that at all. I was like really shy in my own head, living in my own world. But I've heard somebody describe having ADHD, and now that I know that I have it as an adult, it makes me reflect on all these moments as a kid and be like, oh my God, that totally lines up with that. But it's like having an apartment with all the windows open, and there's construction outside and like people talking and buses and stuff. And, getting medicated or working out more, doing things that elevate your dopamine, help close some of those windows and help you focus. And doing things like having a fidget, or for me, drawing, doodling, were a really effective way for me to close some of those windows and absorb more of the world around me. Actually listen to what the teachers were saying, or at work, listen to what the boss was saying, or, some stuff like that. It probably looked like I wasn't paying attention at all, and sometimes I probably wasn't. But for the most part, like it really, really helped me just kind of settle my brain, shut some of those windows, and just like absorb more effectively than I think I would have been able to otherwise.
Right. I want to talk about rhyming. The whole book is written in verses. That's a bold choice because if the rhyme is off, even by syllable, kids feel it, right? So, how painful was that in the writing process?
Like oddly, it came like really natural. That's always been like a thing that I wouldn't say that like I'm like grow up beatboxing with squirrels or freestyle rapping in the parking lot or anything, but like rhyming and kind of coming up with silly stuff like that has always come pretty natural to me. So I've never like employed it in storytelling before, because like none of my animations had rhyming like that. But it just felt right for this story, for this topic, and just like a great way to tell this story. I think the biggest challenge though was like not the rhyming, but the cohesion across the whole story. Like you can create a rhyme, but when you have a bunch of rhymes and you want them to have a through line or a theme across all of them, so it doesn't just sound like a bunch of unrelated crap, that was the hard part.
Right.
And to like really think about like, okay, I like this rhyme, but it doesn't feel like it fits with the overall theme. So maybe I gotta like table it, or you kind of gotta let go of your vanity for certain verses that you think are, oh, that's so clever. But then you think about like a parent reading the story and you're like, this is too long. I need to cut this huge chunk out, or this is redundant, or it doesn't convey this moment in the story as effectively as another. But I think just growing up, and I don't know if it was like listening to a lot of music or whatever it was, but the rhyming and the verse stuff has just always kind of come pretty naturally, strangely enough. I don't know why, but it's funny. My kids kind of have it too. We'll be driving in a car and we'll kind of start a rhyme, and like I'll finish it or they'll finish it. My daughter and I have started playing a game where she'll make up a joke, like the setup, and I have to come up with a punchline. And I just think like doing little things like that, just, I don't know, it's like working out for your muscles. Doing that kind of stuff just helps you stay, I don't know, like fit, rhyming shit, or like being creative, just kind of doing those things, like
Exactly.
keeping the muscles loose and being willing to, not restrict your thinking.
Exactly. Since you mentioned about your daughters, I want to know, you're dad of two young girls. Have you read this book to them? Did they understand the deeper meaning of it?
Now they do. I mean, I will be honest. The first time I wrote it, my daughter, I'm pretty sure she has ADHD as well. So like getting her to sit and actually listen to something without any words or pictures or whatever, especially when it's her, dorky dad, he would get through like two lines and just be like, boring, and go off and do something else. But once it started to have art attached to it, and there was like a specific moment where I read a draft of it to my mom, her grandma, and I think the fact that my mom had a reaction to it, like a really positive reaction, it almost like gave Olivia, my daughter, permission to be like, oh, I can I can actually like engage in this and like process it through a different filter than I was before. Like before it's just like, this is boring. My dad made it. Oh, grandma likes it. Maybe I should actually engage with this on a deeper level, which is super fun. And, we've been drawing a lot more of the shape characters together, and she'll like suggest ideas for like future stories and stuff. But it definitely was something that over time, I think that idea of belonging and fitting in was something that she connected to more directly. And then I have another daughter who just turned 3. Her name's Alice. She's a maniac. She just likes the colors and the shapes. She knows dad made the thing, but she's just, her brain is growing and she doesn't have the pieces yet that might connect to a bigger emotional idea like belonging or stuff like that. and I think a lot of little kids don't have that full brain development to articulate that as in a way that an adult can, but they feel it. They feel it. So where Alice might be looking at the colors and be like, ooh, pretty colors, shapes, jazz hands, my daughter Olivia starts to connect with that feeling, that feeling of belonging, because they've had more of those moments where maybe they didn't feel like they fit in or that they belonged. It's interesting. Like as you go through life and your brain develops, you have more of these experiences that you can connect to a specific emotion. And I think as a kid starts to have that experience and like engage more with the world and just see more, the veil is being removed from the reality around them, and they're finding their shape. They can connect emotions to moments that have made them feel that way. And I think when you have that to refer to, when you consume art, it might remind you of a moment where you felt like that.
Right, right. I think a lot of adults need this book more than kids do. Have you gotten any reaction from adults?
Yeah, I actually have. Like the first draft of it, like I mentioned, my daughter wasn't having any of it, so I had to like read to adults. And I wrote it on a morning where my 3-year-old was sick, and I just kind of had this idea. I wanted to make a children's book, and I wasn't like sure what I wanted to make it on, and I just had this idea about like shapes and like one of them not feeling like he fit in. It just felt like a very abstract but like recognizable way to convey that theme. I actually like typed it on my phone in a Google Doc while my daughter was like laying on the couch watching Bluey on her tablet and some stuff like that. And then I had a meeting with somebody, later on that day, and I read the draft to her, and she got like really emotional. Like she teared up, and it just made me be like, oh, there's something here. Like, when you make any kind of art, the whole point of it is you want to make somebody feel something. You want to make them laugh, or you want them to feel like suspense or, that kind of, emotionality. But to like see that movement, like probably connecting to moments in their life where, maybe they felt like they didn't belong or they didn't fit in. It gave me like confidence that maybe there's something there that I need to keep pushing and working on. I think a lot of us too, you're like really hard on your art and like judge it. I don't know. I'm probably way too hard on my art and the quality of it, where it probably prevents me from putting more out there than I probably should. Because I think that's how you get better as a creative and sharpen your skills, is by putting it out in the world and seeing how the world reacts to it. But getting some of those, initial reactions where people were very emotional about it, it just told me that this is something that maybe people need to hear. And my job in creating this is to not mess it up through the process of creating the book. I want to maintain that emotionality and not detract from that with the visuals. And so part of the process was maintaining that energy, but trying to elevate it through the visuals as I went. And it's been really cool. Like, I've visited a couple schools, and some kids connect more with the emotionality of it than others. But I've also seen some teachers like wiping a tear out of their eye or coming up afterwards and kind of expressing like, oh, I wish I would have had something like this when I was little. And that just like really moves me, because I probably needed something like that too. And it's weird to talk about stuff like this because it's, I don't know, especially back to our social media conversation, everybody tries to reflect this version of themselves, this one angle of their existence where everything looks perfect. But the reality is there's so much beyond that angle. Everybody's dealing with life, and life can be really hard, and people feel a lot of emotions, and I think that creating material that allows them to shine light on that and pause and reflect on that, I think that's like really important, especially for little kids who are just trying to like figure out their place in the world and who they are. I think being able to engage in bigger emotional ideas is pretty important, for kids and adults alike.
Right. I understand. Sometimes the simplest children stories teach us a lot of things.
Yeah, that's so true, and that's hard to do. Like to simplify something, complicated in a way that a kid can enjoy, but an adult can get something out of. Like, that's pretty tricky. I think like in making a children's book, you kind of it changes your brain in a way that you perceive children's books. Like before, I would just read them to my kid and like, oh, that was good, I like that. But when you're actually making one, you look more to the craft of the book. Like how are they using art? How are they using text? What are they doing with the fonts? How do they use negative space? All that kind of stuff. It's super interesting to be at this place now where I'm making more books, and it really has changed how I engage with children's books for better or worse.
Right. You have written a whole book about helping kids feel they belong. You illustrate emotions most adults struggle to even name. And on top of all of that, you are raising two young girls in real time. So I want to ask you something, not as an author, but as a dad who clearly thinks about this stuff very deeply. If every parent listening right now could sit across from you and ask for one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
Yeah, man, it's hard. I mean, I won't pretend to like that I always get parenting right. I make so many mistakes as a parent, but I think that's just part of being a parent. I think a guarantee about parenting, being in the parenting experiences, that you're gonna make a lot of mistakes. But I think it's important to, like the creative process, learn from your mistakes, grow from your mistakes, and try to like parent in a way that aligns to your values and your principles. And for our family, we really value kindness, honesty, gratitude, inclusivity, joy, courage, resilience, grace, and just fun, silliness. So we try to like have that as an anchor to how we engage with our kids. But sometimes we're just throwing spaghetti against the wall to just make it through an evening. Your like energy levels fluctuate. So there's some nights where you're just like, we gotta run out the clock. This is crazy. Uh, but I think, to kind of surmise that into a piece of advice, I think at the end of the day, you got to remember to love and parent the kid that you have instead of the kid that you want them to be or think that they should be.
Right.
That's something that I've learned in having a kid. Like before you have kids, you kind of have a fantasy of what it's going to be like, and it's all Pollyannish and that kind of shit. But like when you actually have a kid, you realize like, oh, this is just a very specific human being. There might be some things that you do that, are part of the experience, but you really just have to like learn how to parent that kid. And then when you have a second kid, know that half the stuff that worked for the first kid isn't going to work for the second kid because it's a completely different person.
Right.
But you love them both the same, and you love them for who they are and not what you want them to be.
Right. That's very beautiful advice you gave. And apart from
Thank you.
that, would you like to share anything with the audience regarding your book?
Yeah. You can pick up Every Shape Has a Place on Amazon.com. I would encourage anybody who dug it, if you're willing to write a review, very appreciated. I also have the next book in the Every Shape series coming out next month, Tuesday, March 17th. It's St. Patrick's Day in the States. So, there's no leprechauns in the book, but get it, check it out. Also, visit broodoptimism.com. I have an email list or a newsletter that you can sign up for on there to get updates on when new books are coming out, pictures of cats wearing monocles, that kind of stuff. And if any of this resonates with you, or like somebody who might benefit from this content, be it a kid, a parent, a teacher, I would greatly appreciate any and all shares. Again, I'm at the front of this journey, but I'm trying to build a brand and an ecosystem of stories and experiences that really help kids and parents connect around some of these big emotional ideas and do it in approachable language, art, and storytelling. And for me to continue this journey, support is needed so that I can fund it and make more, because this feels like the space that I want to be in, a space that I want to contribute my creativity to helping.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you so much for this conversation. Actually, I wanted to ask about brute optimism. That's a very unique name.
Yeah.
So, how did you uncover this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a old boss who actually described me as that at a certain point. Just like, he must have read like an article or something about brute optimism, and kind of the idea around it is like cultivating an unwavering belief in positive outcomes, even in the face of adversity or uncertainty. And I think like I have always hated like toxic positivity. So I don't want this to come across as like toxic positivity on steroids. But I do think it's like about, for me at least, it's about acknowledging reality, but still looking for the positivity or the positive outcomes that can come through in that reality. Like, what can I learn? What can I uncover? What can I discover? I think even in the hardest challenge, there's still something there that is positive, whether that be a learning or something else. And I think, part of branding this pursuit under that was that kind of energy, that outlook. And I think, you might have to look a little bit harder to find some of those positive outcomes, but, that was kind of the initial thought in creating the brand, Root Optimism.
Wow.
And it's evolving over time. I think the way that it's going to take shape, the way it'll take shape over time will, kind of be where the energy of this adventure leads. But that's kind of the initial thought around it.
Right. That's a very hopeful way to look at it.
Yeah, we'll see, Brute optimism. I like it, but hopefully people don't just think of it again as that, toxic positivity on steroids, and something a little bit more authentic.
Yes, great. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think a lot of people needed to hear this today, not just parents, but everyone. And to everyone listening out there, do check out the book. The book name is Every Shape Has a Place by Greg Bro. You can find on Amazon. You can also get a Kindle copy. And you can also
Wonderful.
connect with the author. The link is in the description. Don't forget to check it out.